anywhere else, and it's pretty it's pretty freaking awesome. But I did see a reviewer who stated that people who liked Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block 99 may be surprised at how Zahler. I felt like with Dragged Across Concrete, there's less. The violence is there, but it's not dwelled on as much. Like,
you're right.
Actually, it's kind of ironic because, the characters who you most want to see die a slow and painful death, those frickin' frogmen, they are gone like in a flash, basically. Yep. When they go, it's really fast. Even Vogelman, that's like a split second shot you see of him, and then it's lights out kind of. So I think it's kind of interesting how Zahler approaches it. People are talking about how he glorifies certain things, but it's like the violence per se isn't quite as, it is extreme in parts, like in the Jennifer Carpenter moment is extremely shocking. Because it's more shocking because you don't see it coming at all. You think that's going to play out differently.
That hurt.
No. When I first watched the movie, I was like, first the fingers, and then, wait, are they going to let her? What's going to happen? She has to be in the movie longer because she's hardly been in the movie up to this point, and she's a big actress. And then no, it's like the Janet Leigh moment kind of for her. Yeah.
And she's so good in it. I was watching her again, just her facial expressions. She's very good in this movie. She nails it. Oh, quick question. What would you rather have? Nick Fury's SUV from Captain America Winter Soldier, the one that takes forever for them to get into and apparently can fly, or this van from this movie?
Oh, man.
I mean, without it can't fly. I'll take that out. Fury's car can't fly. Would you want the van, his van, or this van?
I think I would take the van in Dragged Across Concrete because it is tricked out in ways that are practically, if things had turned out differently, would have been, I don't know. It's like it had the sliding hidden panel in the side where you could, point a gun out of. It had the airless tires, whatever that means, that you can't shoot out the tires.
Crazy.
I know. I was like, do you know anything about airless tires? I was like, am I just stupid? And this is a thing I didn't know existed, or did Zahler just make this up for the movie and expected, where it's like, okay, just roll with it, kind of.
Literally.
Yeah. I would take the van from Dragged Across Concrete, but I would use it for good instead of evil.
Hey, there we go. And I love when Vince Vaughn shoots the tire and Mel Gibson goes, "Did you miss?" And Vince Vaughn goes, "Don't be a dick," or something like that. But this movie, go for it. Go for it.
No, just that deadpan rapport that they have is fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, so. Any other scenes you want to touch in this film? Is there any other kind of things you wanted to touch on in here?
Well, we did talk about Don Johnson, and I think he's just in it for a scene, but it's, what a scene. It's a really meaty role. And, he kind of presents, I think his character kind of presents in a bit kind of the moral quandaries of the reviewers we were talking about who feel pulled in two different directions, but kind of come out the other end, like with a sense of kind of admiration or appreciation for what Zahler's done. Because Don Johnson's kind of like, I get it, but these are the rules, and this is I'm tasked with enforcing the law, and I'm in this political position, so therefore I got to do this to you. It's nothing personal, and I can say you gave him too much steel because I'm your buddy, but maybe if I were some just blue collar bureaucrat, I'd be much more, much less straight with you. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I love the Don Johnson career resurgence. Honestly, he's fantastic.
And I really liked how he waited for Vince Vaughn to go out of the room before he just looked at Mel Gibson and said, "That was too much. You did too much." So maybe he just let them talk, let them kind of bluster, and then when it was just Mel Gibson and he because he didn't want to do that in front of his partner. He just kind of let him talk, and then he told him how it was. I thought that was a very strong character moment at that part, and I really liked it. And also, apparently, that stupid, they were rough on the guy, and they cost themselves raises and promotions. The idiots. Yeah. I mean, they didn't have to do any of that to that guy.
Yeah.
And you can tell that they become a little desensitized. So I thought that was another interesting thing as well, that they cost themselves with that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was an interesting bit. What did you think about Vince Vaughn and his fiance? Did you feel like that was a little tacked on? I mean, I liked it. I like that she used the yardstick line that he had used earlier. That was a nice callback.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I liked it for what it was. I think it did shade in his character a bit from kind of the, I don't know, kind of having that girlfriend character made him seem a little less cavalier when he was alone. Maybe he plays up the cowboy angle when he's, like you said, he's kind of beholden to Brett's character. Maybe he's trying to overcompensate a bit by being a bit of a hotshot, whereas his girlfriend kind of grounds him a bit more and keeps him in line a bit more. So I thought it was okay. I was kind of the whole thing about the engagement ring and everything. I thought was a little bit. It brought some character. It connected some character threads nicely, but it felt a little like the anchovies line in a way. It was a bit like, oh, that's almost too much. That's too much writing there, and it's coming around in kind of a bit too much of a typical way, like, oh, I'm dying and I want to know what she would have said, and that seemed a bit too conventional to me, but it wasn't enough to hinder my opinion of the film that much.
And then when he gets the ring for her, and then you find out he's on suspension, he's like, I kind of thought to myself, I'll never be the guy to get her many diamonds, and that felt a little. Yeah. Well, because she is doing really well, and I mean, if they join forces and live together. Mel Gibson said he could get a promotion eventually. So that just seemed like a weird tacked on line to kind of lead to his decision to help Gibson.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a bit, it's a bit of a cliche. Yeah, a cliched moment. And, again, I mean, you got maybe a few, clunkers here and there that don't quite connect, but everything else is so strong. I will say this. The frogmen, every time they encounter someone, they have some exuberantly offensive thing to say.
Yeah, they do.
They like have an offensive one-liner always at the ready to totally to make a bad situation even worse. You have these creeps trying to make jokes while they're killing people. So yeah,
I've been desensitized, but when he says don't pop the liver, he's like, especially black guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, Zahler.
Yeah.
And also, okay, so one of the things I read in most of the reviews is a line by Laurie Holden where I guess the neighborhood is getting a little rougher, and she says, I'm as liberal as a retired cop is, but this neighborhood's making me racist.
Right.
And then they never touch on that for the rest of the movie. So I think that line could have been excised from, I feel like, listen, in every neighborhood there's jerks. So the daughter could be bullied. But that line, right? I mean, maybe that's what you say in private. Maybe people do have that conversation, but that line by her just felt thrown in as a bit of a lightning rod. I don't know what you felt about that line.
I can see what you're saying with it. It might that might have been a little forced, maybe. I think what's conveyed up to that point, and what we've seen of the neighborhood and how the daughter gets treated and how she actually doesn't really react to what happens to her, because it's happened enough and she's kind of tough, is kind of, it kind of speaks for itself. I mean, you could dive even further into the fact that, Gibson's character, Bridgman, is not operating at his peak potential.
Yeah.
Don Johnson's telling him why, you're with a partner who's 20 years younger than you. And and Bridgman says something about how he's making now what he did years ago or something like that. Yeah. So
I know the salary of detectives here in the fake city.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's what he said. He's like, I know the salaries of detectives in Bulwark. They live in Bulwark.
Yeah. But I to go down even further, like you could see that, Laurie Holden's character saying that as kind of like this, I'm not defending it, but it's just like this sense of middle class pressure, kind of like the living paycheck to paycheck thing. And it's even more difficult when, one of the people in the household can't work or has limited capability of working, which again goes back to putting kind of the onus on Ridgman to provide for his family, which is another layer of pressure, kind of, given the circumstances that they find themselves in. So there's probably a whole socioeconomic dissertation to be written on where Dragged Across Concrete goes with that sort of thing.
And also, she, because of her, the MS, she can't travel, so her world's probably gotten much smaller. So, when you are taken out of that, you have much more time to maybe dwell or think, or, you're not out in the world as much. Does that make sense? So maybe you can, because you're not out in the world, when you kind of, so I mean, yeah, there's a way. I wasn't offended by it. And I thought, well, maybe characters do say this in private. I mean, I don't condone it. But I feel like everyone has to say that when they talk about this movie. I've noticed that's just popped up in every review. So I just thought, well, that line has really struck a chord with people.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I was reading an article in Empire magazine that actually brought up that line. And that was, I think, the interview where Brett Zahler was saying, yeah, I'm setting out to provoke people. So I was like, yeah. But you brought up a good point. It's like,
wait, I wish I would have loved if you were like in public and you just went, ugh.
Yeah. Like I told you before the show, Mark, you're like the only person I know who's watched this movie other than me. Yeah. So, but what happens when your world is kind of whittled down and it's like you start to, people who have a much broader capability to move around and experience more, you'd be surprised at how many people have kind of closed minds towards a certain thing, or you develop kind of a closed-mindedness towards certain things. I did want to bring up something, and not to sound woke about anything, but you brought up Laurie Holden's character and how she has MS. The brother of Henry is also disabled.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of interesting you have that sort of representation coming from two different socioeconomic classes kind of people.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So, and I mean, how often you saw, Junior in Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
But you also, these are things.
Zahler's an interesting guy.
Yeah, it's like it's like there's so much to unpack with this, and it's just there's stuff in there again, like whether it's the violence or whether it's a line of dialogue or whatever. There's just stuff in his films that you don't see anywhere else. I would say I prefer him to Tarantino at this point. Maybe it's a bit premature, but I feel like Tarantino, again, that there's that self-satisfaction that kind of bleeds through into his movies that kind of takes me out of them a bit, because it's more him than the characters, whereas with Zahler, he's totally invested 110% in these characters. He's not condoning what they do. He's just presenting always this series of unfortunate events, Yeah. And he does it extremely well, and I kind of like that downbeat sort of thing. Yeah.
My worry, though, and you're an avid Onion reader, so I used to buy those Onion books, and my favorite one that I use for a lot of people is there is an Onion article probably from easily over a decade ago, where, man, maybe more, but they're saying Marilyn Manson's now going door to door trying to offend people. And
yes, yeah.
I hope that Zahler doesn't get to that point. So right now he is pushing buttons, but I hope he doesn't get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he will, but I don't know. Does that seem? Do you think he could go that direction?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because he didn't direct this film, but he did write the script for Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, which garnered some controversy for some of the reasons that Drag It Across Concrete is